The Civil War, a defining moment in American history. The American Civil War stands as a pivotal chapter in our nation's story. Brother fought against brother. The very fabric of our country was torn apart. But from this conflict, a stronger, more united America would emerge. For 4 long years, from 1861 to 1865, the nation was engulfed in battle. The Civil War touched every corner of the country. It affected every family. No one was left untouched by its reach. The war tested our values, our resolve, and our very identity as a nation. The Civil War was more than just a military conflict. It was a clash of ideologies. It was a battle for the soul of America. The outcome would shape the future of our country for generations to come.
Seeds of conflict, understanding the causes. The roots of the Civil War ran deep into American soil. They grew from long-standing differences between the North and South. These differences were about more than just geography. They were about ways of life, economic systems, and fundamental beliefs about freedom and equality. In the North, industry was booming, cities were growing, immigrants were arriving in large numbers. The economy was diverse and changing rapidly. But in the South, life revolved around agriculture. Cotton was king. The plantation system relied heavily on slave labor. This created 2 very different Americas within one nation. Slavery was at the heart of the conflict. The North had gradually abolished slavery. Many Northerners saw it as morally wrong. But in the South, slavery was seen as essential to their way of life. As new states joined the Union, debates raged about whether they should be slave states or free states. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 tried to maintain a balance, but tensions continued to grow. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final straw for many Southern states.
First shots and early battles, Fort Sumter to Bull Run. The Civil War began with a bang at Fort Sumter. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on this Union-held fort in South Carolina. The bombardment lasted 34 hours. Finally, the Union soldiers surrendered. No lives were lost, but the war had begun.
President Lincoln called for volunteers to defend the Union. The country was now officially at war with itself. In the early days, both sides thought the war would be short. Many believed it would be over in a matter of months. Young men rushed to enlist. They feared missing out on the glory of battle. But the reality of war would soon hit home.
The first major land battle came at Bull Run, near Manassas, Virginia, in July 1861. Bull Run was a wake-up call for both sides. Spectators from Washington, D.C. came to watch, expecting a quick Union victory. Instead, they witnessed a Confederate triumph. The battle was fierce and bloody. Union troops were forced to retreat in disarray. It became clear that this war would not be won easily or quickly.
Turning tides Antietam and its aftermath. The Battle of Antietam marked a crucial turning point in the Civil War. It took place on September 17, 1862, near Sharpsburg, Maryland. This single day of fighting remains the bloodiest in American history. Over 22,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or went missing. The battle was tactically inconclusive, but it had far-reaching strategic and political consequences. Antietam halted Confederate General Robert E. Lee's first invasion of the North. Lee had hoped to win a decisive victory on Union soil. He wanted to prove the Confederacy's strength and gain foreign support. But Union General George McClellan managed to stop Lee's advance. The Confederates were forced to retreat back to Virginia. This gave the North a much-needed morale boost. The battle's outcome had international implications. Britain and France had been considering recognizing the Confederacy as an independent nation. Antietam made them think twice. It showed that the Union could stand its ground.
Gettysburg, the battle that changed everything. The Battle of Gettysburg stands as the defining moment of the Civil War. It took place over 3 sweltering days in July 1863. The quiet Pennsylvania town became the site of the war's largest and deadliest battle. More than 50,000 soldiers from both sides fell as casualties. The fate of the nation hung in the balance. General Robert E. Lee led his Confederate army north into Pennsylvania. He hoped to strike a decisive blow against the Union, but he met unexpected resistance from Union forces led by General George Meade. The 2 armies clashed in the fields and hills around Gettysburg. The fighting was intense and brutal. Each side showed incredible courage and determination. The battle reached its climax on the 3rd day. Lee ordered a massive assault on the center of the Union line. This attack, known as Pickett's Charge, was a desperate gamble. Thousands of Confederate soldiers marched across an open field. They faced a hail of Union gunfire. The charge failed, and with it, Lee's hopes for victory. The Confederates retreated, leaving Gettysburg a Union victory.
Lincoln's powerful words, the Gettysburg Address. 4 months after the Battle of Gettysburg, I arrived to dedicate a national cemetery. It was November 19th, 1863. Thousands gathered to hear me speak. I wasn't even the main speaker that day. But my short speech would become one of the most famous in American history. The Gettysburg Address lasted only 2 minutes. It was just 272 words long. But in those few words, I captured the essence of American democracy. I reminded the nation what we were fighting for. It wasn't just about preserving the Union. It was about ensuring that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. My words gave new meaning to the Civil War. I spoke of a new birth of freedom. I honored those who had given their lives for this cause.
Section 7. Freedom's Proclamation, Emancipation, and its Impact. The Emancipation Proclamation was a turning point in the Civil War. President Lincoln issued it on January 1st, 1863. With this document, he declared that all slaves in Confederate states were free. It was a bold move that changed the nature of the conflict. The war was no longer just about preserving the Union. It became a fight for human freedom. The proclamation didn't free all slaves immediately. It only applied to states in rebellion. Slaves in border states loyal to the Union were not affected. But it was still a powerful symbol. It showed that the Union was committed to ending slavery. This gave new hope to millions of enslaved people. Many saw it as a promise of freedom to come. The Emancipation Proclamation had important military effects. It allowed black men to join the Union Army. Nearly 200,000 African Americans would serve as soldiers and sailors. They played a crucial role in the Union's victory. Their bravery helped change attitudes about race and citizenship.
Section 8. The final push, Sherman's march, and Lee's surrender. As 1864 turned to 1865, the tide of war had firmly shifted in the Union's favor. General William Tecumseh Sherman led a campaign that would break the back of the Confederacy. His famous march to the sea cut a path of destruction through Georgia. Sherman's army moved from Atlanta to Savannah, destroying everything in its path that could aid the Confederate war effort. Sherman's march was controversial. It brought the harsh reality of war to Southern civilians. Homes, farms, and railroads were destroyed. But it achieved its goal. It demoralized the South and cut off supplies to Confederate armies. Sherman then turned north, marching through the Carolinas. The Confederacy was being squeezed from all sides. Meanwhile, in Virginia, Union General Ulysses S. Grant was relentlessly pursuing Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Grant's strategy was one of attrition. He knew the Union had more men and resources. He was willing to accept heavy losses if it meant wearing down Lee's army. The fighting was brutal. Battles like Cold Harbor saw thousands of men fall in a single day. Finally, on April 9, 1865, Lee realized he could fight no longer. He surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. The two generals met in the parlor of a small house. Grant offered generous terms.
Section 9. Reconstruction, Rebuilding a Fractured Nation. With the war's end came the enormous task of Reconstruction. This was the period when America had to rebuild itself, both physically and politically. The South lay in ruins. Millions of former slaves were now free but faced an uncertain future. The country had to figure out how to bring the Confederate States back into the Union. President Lincoln had plans for a generous reconciliation. He wanted to heal the nation's wounds quickly. But his assassination in April 1865 changed everything. His successor, Andrew Johnson, clashed with Congress over Reconstruction policies. This led to years of political turmoil. Congress passed laws and constitutional amendments aimed at protecting the rights of former slaves. But enforcing these new rights proved challenging. The Reconstruction era saw both progress and setbacks. African Americans gained citizenship and the right to vote. Many were elected to public office. Schools and churches were built. But there was also resistance to these changes. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan used violence and intimidation to oppose racial equality.
Section 10. Lessons from the past, the Civil War's enduring legacy. The Civil War left an indelible mark on American history. Its effects are still felt today, more than 150 years later. The war settled some questions but raised many others. It preserved the Union and ended slavery. But it also left a legacy of racial tension and regional differences that continue to shape our nation. One of the war's most important legacies is the strengthening of the federal government. Before the war, many saw the United States as a loose collection of states. After the war, the nation emerged as a more unified whole. The federal government took on new powers and responsibilities. This shift would have far-reaching consequences for American politics and society. The Civil War also changed America's economy. The North's industrial might, harnessed for the war effort, led to rapid economic growth.